partidei. Delgado acolo este. Va fi corner, dragi ascultători.
So we'll just go, Duncan. I can't see you. So in terms of giving me the nod,
Oh, I see.
I would, just say you got 2 minutes and make a joke out of it,
Right.
and I'll react to it. Okay, ready to go?
Yeah.
If you're lost and you look, then you will find me, time after time. Hello, I'm Richard Jackson, and I'm joined by author, screenwriter, lecturer, Tony Vegetables. Which is a thing I thought was funny. I won't do that again. I just thought that it made me laugh. So we're here to talk about John McTiernan and Michael Crichton's 1999 film, The 13th Warrior, based on the novel you find here, East of the Dead by Crichton. This was at your request. I actually watched this. I'd never seen this. I watched this for this and did a lot of research. Because I wanted to sort of get in, because this is very much not my bag, baby. So
But it's McTiernan.
It is, yes.
So, so the kind of diehard kind of, and as you mentioned, very cleverly, sort of accidentally, but anyway, like it's got that. How did you describe it?
Well, it's a men on a mission film. So essentially, it's about a white collar man going into a group of blue collar people, and it's the classic kind of story of the upper middle class person going into kind of working class group. Essentially.
Yeah. In contrast with, or comparison and contrast with Die Hard, which is the other way around, where the blue collar worker goes into white collar sort of territory and blows shit up.
Yeah.
So
I think a lot of the McTiernan stuff is kind of about blue collar groups, and because Predator is a similar thing. I don't want to talk about Predator too much because the internet's got you covered on that front.
Yeah.
But quite a few of his movies, even something like Hunt for Red October, has that kind of tension in it as well. And I found it very much classic in that sense. I mean, it's a loose adaptation of Beowulf, isn't it?
It's a weird combination of things in that he was, like Michael Crichton, when he wrote the book, he was challenged to write a version of Beowulf that was interesting. Right. Which I think is kind of, it sort of feels like a bit of an insult, because I think he knew people in academic circles that said, oh, Beowulf, it was a really boring story. How do you make that interesting? And he said, well, I think I could make it interesting. And they said, well, do it then. So he did, and he went away, and about a year later he sort of came back with this book. And it kind of is based on Beowulf in the sense that it's like, well, suppose you kind of like unravelled this whole thing and went back to the real story that got gradually told and retold and became Beowulf. So something became a dragon in the final telling, but originally was something else, and the monster Grendel was originally something else, but it sort of gets exaggerated through the telling. And so that was sort of the premise, that there's behind a Beowulf story is a real story. The slight problem with it, which he admits in the book, is that actually the story that's taking place is way after Beowulf was first sort of, well, not the version we've got written down, but it was way before it was first told. We know it existed sort of probably like way back into the 7th century in England, but that doesn't really matter. That's just a detail. But the other part of it, which is kind of interesting, and which makes the sort of basis of the book, actually forms the sort of structure of the book, is that anyone who does research into Vikings, like I'm sure you do, and certainly I have
constantly.
Yeah, like you do. There's one particular source that's really, really quoted at great length, and people go to it and sort of pore over it because it's such a valuable and rare resource on Norse life. And it's this Arab traveller, Ibn Fadlan, who was a real person, who really was sort of booted out of Baghdad because he did something with someone else's wife, so they just sent him as an ambassador to the most distant, hostile place they could think of. And that happened to be the River Volga, where the Rus, these Vikings, had settled. And so he was going as an ambassador to these lands, and he encountered Vikings, and he wrote an account of meeting Vikings and there seeing a Viking funeral and all this stuff. And and it kind of, and then he leaves them and carries on his way, and that's sort of where the account ends. But what Crichton did was like imagine that there was loads more of it, and he continues the story basically, and he goes with them and gets involved in this big old kind of monster fight.
Yeah, well, it becomes a kind of story, and it's done elsewhere. And I think a recent example is Bone Tomahawk, but it's kind of troglodytes. They're kind of troglodyte people that subterranean troglodyte people that masquerade as beasts. So they, it's like he walks on 2 feet, but on 2 like an animal underman, and they have the kind of headdresses and stuff, and they take their dead to create the illusion that they're somehow magical and everything. Yeah. It's quite gruesome, isn't it? In quite a lot. I mean, in fits and starts, like the bits when they find their friends' decapitated heads in the lair. Those sculpts of those heads are really good, because now I don't want to go on a tangent about decapitation in film, but quite often heads look kind of like fake heads, and now we have the function to paste a real face onto a fake head, and that there are instances of that looking really good when it's just kind of static. In this, it's 1999, so that definitely isn't the case. But the heads of the cast members that are in those kind of roots, they look amazing.
There's actually the bit that gets me every time is when they first go into that house. Remember, they find a child who's sort of like run away and it's all bloody, and they go back to the house where the child sort of fled from, and they go in and it's sort of mayhem and blood and gore and everything, and there's just on a bed or something, there's a blanket and an arm sticking out, and he goes and he just sort of like lifts it, and the arm kind of like slithers. The severed arm.
It does a great
kind of flop on the floor, and it's the way it kind of flops, and there's a bit of give in it, and it's just like. Oh.
And then it's very because it sells that really well, and then he runs outside and pukes.
Yeah.
And this is the thing with him as a character he is. My dad was a tradesman, or he was retired, and he used to call people like that soft-handed ponces. And, he was
Pretty
what my
much
dad would call a soft-handed ponce. And the whole point of his arc in the first kind of half of the film is to toughen up and become a warrior, because he even specifically says, I'm not a warrior. He has his eye makeup and his kind of headdress and stuff, and he gets taken into their world. And he is a court poet that got busted knocking off someone's wife. He's really unsympathetic, and he goes into this kind of world of the Northmen. One thing I've often heard about this, and there was less of it than I thought, but it isn't very nicely done, is the portrayal of being among people that don't speak your language. Yes. Yeah, and the way he learns it. I kind of have mixed feelings about that. I'm not being glib.
I really like it.
It's really well handled. What I felt was that should have occurred. If that was me, I would have done that over an hour and had it slowly break down. It might not be a very entertaining film to watch, but to slowly, because it's very much like that episode of The Simpsons where Bart goes on the French exchange. Do you remember that? It's like, and it's done with that scale of brevity, because it's sort of like he learns the Norse language in the time it takes to sit around a fire, basically. It's how it looks.
Yeah, well, it's montage, isn't it? So it's kind of, it's like...
Because it's the same thing, he has to learn to be a warrior as well.
Look, do we have more fighting, or do we have a bloke gradually learning a language? Let's make the montage bit the language.
I think there's something to it. Well, because the two things that are going on there as well is that, so really, I suppose only characters that speak Arabic being portrayed as English, because it's the language is understood. The way to phrase it is the language that is understood in the film is portrayed as being in English. So Arabic is in English, and when he learns Norse is in English. Yeah. So him and Omar Sharif are speaking English, and they go into the camp and everyone's speaking Norse, and then it kind of the two languages blend. So they'll sort of go like, she's fatter than your and that's really clever, but it's done across one scene, and it kind of felt as if it was done to sort of just he has to learn Norse.
It's a beautiful moment, and it's a moment that sticks in a lot of people's minds, and I really, really like it because it's
very well executed,
and I like it partly because it's a character moment. Like, he's not just this soft kind of like guy who's grown up in a sort of palace environment with luxury and as much Turkish delight as you can eat, presumably.
Historically accurate.
Well, yeah. Haven't looked into that, but I will.
It's probably true.
And but it kind of shows his determination. It shows his intelligence, and it shows his determination. And he's the one well, obviously he's the one who you want to sort of twig the really important things at really important moments, and he kind of like works it out. He works out, you know, when they're in the caves and the thunder.
That's his. He has that kind of. He's not the kind of, because he's portrayed. And Antonio Banderas is 5'9", so he's not the hugest guy, but he's not the smallest guy either. But he's constantly, I think, stood in a trench next to all these other actors.
Yeah.
Because they tower over him, and they could refer to him as the little man. But he has the wits. You know, he doesn't have the physical strength necessarily, but he has the wits. There is a scene where he hulks out and goes mental, and just when he just just starts running guys through.
Part of his transformation, isn't it?
Yeah, the transformation's handled really nicely.
And it's really. But I mean, what I was saying about the language bit, it's a character moment for him, and it kind of, the thing about it, because the reason I have mixed feelings about it is I think it's really beautifully done, but on the other hand, it absolutely wouldn't work.
right.
In that, like, the idea that you could just listen. Like to a language that has no connection with your language. If we were doing it, like as English speakers listening to Old Norse, we probably could do it, because actually there are bits of Old Norse in there where you think, oh, that sounds like when Bolvi stands up and says, "I will be the first man," and you can tell that that's what he's saying, because the words are basic.
Yeah, well, they have those common roots.
Yeah, Verde, something Verde Ersteman, and you think, okay, yeah, it's common roots, so you can get that. So it would work for us. For an Arab, probably not. But
it's sort of like English and
I really don't want to worry about that, actually.
I mean, it's, you know, I think it's a character moment. It's designed to portray his kind of intelligence and his acuity and that kind of thing. And he's a linguist, because what's it they say? You can draw sounds.
Draw sounds, yeah.
I found that moment quite tender, and he's like, he kind of thinks about it. He goes like, yeah, I can draw sounds. I can draw sounds for you. It's
and actually, nice. Bolvi, the way he's played is really good, and it's just about the casting really, because he hasn't got that much to do, and certainly hasn't got much to say, and he's mostly just standing there, you know, brooding and looking like he means business, and he does that very, very well. But also the few moments when he steps forward and says something, like that moment, and then later when he draws it in the sand, he repeats it, and it's like, bloody hell, he's remembered it from that one time. So you get that he is a formidable character.
McTiernan, something through his films, he's really good at handling human relationships, and I think the way he directs actors and dialogue really sells into that, because I think a lot of what worked in a lot of his movies are the characters are really human, and there's lots of visual storytelling, but there's kind of focus on dialogue takes and facial expressions, and the way the camera lingers on characters a lot and allows them to speak, allows them moments to breathe. Because obviously Die Hard is about all these different relationships, friendships, romantic relationships, antagonistic relationships that are all served through various means. Predator is a kind of a team-up film, and it goes that way to do that. Something like the Thomas Crown Affair, obviously, it's a kind of vexed romance in the middle of that. You would say like Hunt for Red October is kind of military bureaucratic tension. I think he handles those interpersonal relationships really well, and I think it really shows in this film, because as you say, the way he's able to integrate with that group, and you know, they play on each other's strengths and stuff, and it's a team film.
And those moments where he kind of has a moment of bonding with them, it's like you're cheering that on, because that's what you want. And then there's little moments where he kind of makes that connection, and also sometimes it's tiny little details, beautiful little details, like with the sort of anonymous woman who sort of like heals his wounds, and then he sleeps with her before because they think they're all going to die. And then when he's riding off, she's walking the other way, and she just puts her hand out and just touches his leg as they're passing. That no one says anything, but it's just such a beautiful little detail.
His films are full of that. I think it's sort of stolen glances and kind of little physical things. It's something that I don't think he gets the credit for. He's one of these people, you know, talk about John McTiernan generally. He had this kind of wiretap situation that was all very unfortunate, that kind of torpedoed his career. Also things such as Rollerball. He had a few kind of duds, didn't he, towards the end of his career. And it seems the kind of FBI wiretap thing may have been unjust, I don't want to say because I don't really know, but it definitely kind of undid, according to his daughter, it just undid him mentally. It was really taxing on him. So, you know, and it's our loss, I think, really, you know, in terms of what could have been. For example, he was supposed to come back and do that fourth Die Hard film. Regardless of what you think about it, I'd love to have seen his take on it, because at least it'd be him doing a kind of big movie again. And he returned for Die Hard with a Vengeance and did a fantastic job. It was a really great movie.
He does. He gets Well, he's one of those directors who gets action, obviously, but gets the character within an action kind of situation. So the action has a lot more meaning, because there are a lot of people who can just direct action kind of like logistically, and it sort of all flows, and it can be as boring as hell, because it just doesn't mean very much, because you don't really care very much about the characters. But he's very good at getting you to care about the characters.
Yeah, it's something. So Jan Bond did Speed. He was the cinematographer on Die Hard, and I think probably Die Hard on a Bus. It's got one of the people from Die Hard to direct it. Speed is great, it's great, but I don't think, and the action is very well handled and it looks great, but I don't think the personal stuff works quite as well. I think it wants to be Die Hard in the kind of like shoot the hostage and the relationship with Jeff Bridges and stuff, Jeff Daniels. It wants to be that, but it just doesn't quite work quite as well. There's something, it's about 80% of the way there, whereas I think McTiernan really would have made those relationships sing a bit more with the same cast, just through subtle differences.
I do think the casting matters. I think his choices are good choices, and not always the obvious choice. Like Bruce Willis, it's like that's
the guy from Moonlighting.
Yeah, it's not the obvious choice, but my God, you can't imagine it any other way now. And well, maybe you can, but do you want to?
Yeah, screw you if you are. I just need to, one thing, so I don't know where we are time-wise, and something I've sort of singularly failed to address. You're wearing genuine chainmail that also have a sword.
Yeah.
I kind of thought I could let that go unsaid, but I think it's just, this is the most committed sort of costume situation we've ever had on this show. I can smell the oil and the battle.
It's not a costume, Richard.
Oh no,
it's not a costume.
No, it's not.
This
is actually weighs 15 kilograms.
It's post-Brexit casual wear.
For
useful for all manner of scenarios, like scrapping in the supermarket aisles for the last.
Shouting in a.
I'm not going to go. No, I'm not going to do that.
No, don't touch Brexit. Don't touch Brexit.
But this is because one of the things that people always talk about in relation to the 13th Warrior is the historical accuracy or not of various things in it, and because it for people who are into Vikings like I am, so you can probably tell.
Yeah.
There are very few films about, or certainly a few years ago there were very few films about Vikings. There's a few more now, and there's the series Vikings, which is kind of.
It's just a Viking place.
Yeah, it's kind of. Anyway, the series Vikings, which is kind of complicated in its relationship with history in all sorts of annoying ways. And in a way, 13th Warrior is too, but it was always a sort of go-to movie for like getting the feels, And I think that's the thing, that lots of people who are into the period, roll your eyes at certain details, but actually when it comes down to it, the kind of feel of the thing, it feels really authentic. And that, again, partly is the casting, because there's, God, I've forgotten his name, Derek something? The guy who plays I can't remember the character's name either, so that's really helpful. The blonde guy, he's a Norwegian actor.
Oh yeah.
He's a little guy, but tough as nuts, He
has the fight against the German
Yes,
guy,
exactly. And he's a Norwegian actor, and so he sounds and kind of looks the part.
That's my alarm to take my eye medicine. Ignore that. We always get in trouble for not editing this show. But anyway, yes, carry on.
So, and it's partly that casting. There's Norwegian actors in there, and they're speaking a kind of version of Norwegian, I think, which is kind of like oldified. That's a technical term. So it feels that, but also, I mean, the book, they took a lot of stuff from the book that really, it's not just like research, but because it's based on that contemporary account of Ibn Fadlan, that it is actually an eyewitness account. So the Viking funeral, all that early stuff, when he's first meeting them, all that stuff is almost like documentary stuff.
Okay,
it's actually, it's taken from a first-hand
This is why
account.
you're here, because this type of thing, like I say, is not my area. So I have no concept of any of this. So this is why you're here, and I think a lot of people in our audience are into this kind of stuff. So this is why
I don't even care if they're not, to be honest, because
that's the sort
I'm
of
just going to talk about it anyway.
belligerently doing stuff that people don't want to watch is our trademark. That's why we're so deeply unpopular.
But one of the things in it is the armour. And it's a really odd thing. It's like, because the Michael Crichton book, it follows the Michael Crichton book pretty closely. There are a few things that are added, but nothing really of any great significance in terms of the story and the way the story unfolds. There are a few, like Melchizedek isn't in the book, and I think Omar Sharif wishes he hadn't been in the film.
Yeah, bless him. And he
absolutely
didn't act for a while
thought
after.
it was trash. And I don't really get why.
He's really good in it, and he's not in it for that long. So in terms of his embarrassment, you would think.
And he's in the really serious bit where it's
he
kind
has one of the best parts, and then he kind of.
And afterwards, he just absolutely slammed it, and I think he didn't have a very good experience, and it was a bit of a
I think
torturous.
it's similar to Sean Connery in Lady Extraordinary Gentleman. It's sort of like, I'm not going to act now because of this. Sharif came back, Sean Connery hasn't, but he took a few years out. And it's like, well, this is the thing with this movie, because Michael Crichton came on to do loads of reshoots himself, because he's an author, but he's also director of many things that I'm a big fan of, including Westworld. But what I found interesting, as I said to you before we kicked off, the beginning of the film says John McTiernan and Michael Crichton film, and that's a legal union thing. So whatever happened behind the scenes, he was able to get your joint director credit, because often someone can reshoot, and there are percentages involved in how you get your credit as a director when you do reshoots and stuff like that. So whatever happened, and it seemed, it's one of these things people like to sort of jump on that, but it's like, well, the author of the book came in and redid these scenes, and there's something I know John McTiernan had a different composer, but Crichton brought in Jerry Goldsmith. Jerry Goldsmith is Jerry Goldsmith, so that's always going to be good. But it is like a kind of, firstly, it's had all these behind the scenes troubles. I remember when it came out, and this is the summer or the year of, The Matrix and The Phantom Menace and all these huge movies, and The Sixth Sense. I think it opened second behind The Sixth Sense in its first week and kind of dropped off. It was a flop, and it was always kind of like, this film is terrible and you shouldn't watch it, was the thing around it popularly. And then when I watched it, because I've heard people, you in particular, but people say no, actually you should check it out. Having watched it, it's kind of like, this is nowhere near the kind of fiascos we get these days. In terms of having directors replace it. So it's nowhere near. You never know. It doesn't feel compromised.
No, you don't get. I don't get any sense of any. It seems absolutely clear. Like, the story's a simple one, and they're clear about the characters. And once you've got that, it's like, well, as long as you're competent in physically putting it together, it's like it's going to work on some level. And it didn't feel like one of those horrible messes that they try to fix in the edit and can't quite do.
I think that's got worse over the years, and what that actually means is more catastrophic, because they seem to be more prepared to have something that's totally unreleasable and go like, fuck it, we can do it. Yeah. Whereas this totally made sense. It didn't feel like there was big chunks taken out of it. It flowed properly. The relationships felt intact. I know there's a few things. They recast the kind of head troglodyte witch woman was played originally by someone much older. Yeah. And then I think, which is quite a funny studio note, they felt it didn't make the heroes look particularly heroic if they murdered an old lady. Yes. So it's like, murder a young, sexier lady, and that's way more sympathetic. That's a better...
Yes, femme fatale.
Yes, we're going to go down that kind of...
Not just an old granny.
An
old fat granny.
That's weird.
Yeah,
we don't want that.
It is a bit weird. Do you know what? I think that's probably a good decision.
Granny killing.
Because when you see her, you kind of think...
Well, she looks like she could put up a fight. That's the
there is that. But I know she's all. She looks quite glamorous, really.
Yeah. And that is
she's the most glamorous of that.
From what I understand, that's a choice they made. I think it was a Michael Crichton thing.
I think overall it's probably the right one.
But, just a granny being decapitated, whilst hilarious.
Like Pat Butcher. Well, it could have been more like Pat Butcher, kind of, because she looks like she would put up a real fight.
She would. Pam, I can't remember her name. Pat Butcher, anyway. That's all the Americans at home. I love those anachronistic British soap references.
But I think, the thing for me is that that I realised from reading the book recently, which people had said to me, "Oh, you must read the book," and it's really great, and I would absolutely recommend it.
I did notice it's not very.
No,
big,
it's not big.
It's quite kind of big. Where are we at here?
Also available as an audiobook. For those too lazy to actually move their eyes. That's I am one of those people.
Yeah,
so,
fair enough.
I'm a big fan of audiobooks.
And now you can listen to them at double speed.
That's weird.
That's the thing.
That's not.
No, because people get. I think Netflix are going to offer double speed. playback on that? Because directors have really kicked off about that.
Yeah,
which I
well, they
understand.
should.
Yeah. It's sort of like the frame rate thing. It's frame blending on TV. The other thing now is people watching TV at double time. You give me a wave there, Dan.
No.
Sorry. Don't look behind the curtain.
I know.
I know.
Oh,
We have a camera operator. It's so fucking rare that it's someone other than me and Duncan in the room that we get to actually watch the cameras. Yeah, as I said, really not my kind of thing, but I watched it for purposes of this, and I did enjoy it. And it's kind of, it's always been this thing that was a big disaster and a fiasco. And I remember when it hit the video shops, and it's one of those, you get those films that are on the shelf in the video shop, and it's like, don't watch that one. Everybody knows that you don't watch that one. And that's so many movies, like so many things we've talked about over the years are things that have had this kind of tainted thing. And actually they're really great films.
Well, The Thing was kind of, The Thing absolutely was slammed.
Oh God, yeah.
And people hated it. Well, critics hated it. I think some people liked it, but it was, again, I mean, that was just way ahead of its time.
Well, John McTiernan, again, another one. 2 films torpedoed by Spielberg, actually, The Thing and Last Action Hero. There's Jurassic Park and E.T. But Last Action Hero is really clever, and I will die on that hill. It's a really funny, really clever, really well-observed film that kind of John McTiernan looking at the real personas of these people and the real action cliches and reverse engineering them and making a farce out of it. And it got absolutely slammed by the critics. It died at the box office. It's a great, great movie, and it's a great John McTiernan's most sort of family-orientated thing, and it's still quite nasty in places. But again, and it's another thing, he kind of is able to handle these character relationships and stuff, and he's able to make it look a certain way. We talked about it before, we just talk about it again, but it's a film that takes the East Coast and the West Coast, and the West Coast is the fancy Hollywood world, and the East Coast is the nasty Paul Schrader New York.
Yeah.
It's really clever. We'll talk about that different video, but it's John McTiernan, so it's relevant.
I want to talk about some nerdy stuff, though. I mean, not like...
Nerdier stuff.
Yeah, so it's on a sort of scale. This is like... Yeah, it's not like we're not already in the nerd zone. But anyway, a different nerdism. Because what was interesting, like reading the book, it doesn't deviate really significantly. The film doesn't deviate from the book. There are a few minor changes, but there's some additions, and there's sort of scenes, things that happen, which have been added, and also there are some really strange anachronisms.
Okay.
There's some really accurate stuff, because
Oh, we got
sorry,
to wrap up,
because can we play this at double speed? Because the sort of accuracy comes from the source material to some extent, and all the really wild inaccuracies are things that have been added for the film.
Right. Okay.
So, for example, like the whole bit. I mean, it's really funny and it works really well on its own terms. But where they laugh at the size of his horse and say, "Oh, you bring a dog to
an Arab would bring a dog to war."
Yeah. And their horses are massive, like Shire horses. And actually, it would have been completely the other way around. That like there were Viking ponies. Now these really short, stocky things that could just trot for 100 miles without stopping, and would have been really short and squat. And an Arab horse would have been significantly
Huge.
bigger. But also, the really weird thing is the armour that they're wearing, and this is partly why I'm wearing this. I just like wearing it, but. So this is the authentic thing. This is what a wealthy Norse warrior would wear, and only a wealthy one, because like every single one of these has to be hand.
I saw a guy making those.
Riveted.
It's ridiculous.
But in that, for some reason, and I know that you want to differentiate the characters and have them look distinct and different. And if they were all wealthy warriors, they'd all look like this, pretty much, but a bit more muscly, probably. But there's the big guy's got like a gladiator helmet, like literally like a gladiator's helmet from what 700 years before, and then it gets really complicated where there's a guy in a conquistador helmet and kind of breastplate, which is significantly later, sort of like 16th, even 17th century, and Bulvi, the Beowulf character, has basically like 15th century European armour. Full plate armour, which just didn't exist, and also the swords are kind of like, so this is a Viking sword, right? I'm getting caught up in the chainmail this is a Viking sword, and it's got a grip for a single hand, and that's what they were like. There were no real variations on that. But you'll notice, like in the film, they've all got these grips about this long, so they can do the big
and they even
double-handed
do a dialogue take about
thing.
him. They give him the double-handed sword, and he can't carry it. And stuff.
Yeah, and in fact, you know, you'd have had this in one hand and a shield in the other. So you didn't need or didn't really have the option of using two hands on a sword very often. So it wasn't really a thing. So there's some really weird. It's a really weird mix. A really weird mix of like. Very, very accurate because it's from a historical source, and some really odd choices, which must be deliberate. Actually, those armor choices must be deliberate. But
sometimes,
why?
sometimes they just do it because it looks cool. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
I think
But
so.
You think there's a more awareness.
Unless it's
in it.
also saying it's kind of timeless. So I did kind of wonder whether that was a sort
True. Well,
of, kind of a
it's
thing.
kind of a realistic take on a myth, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's kind of it sidesteps anything kind of magical in exchange for realistic interpretations. Well, that's all we've got time for this very special episode. Thanks for coming back, Toby.
Thank you.
Toby's recording a few things today, so we're going to have a lot going on. We used to amusingly pretend not to know what all the social media links were, but we got bored of that, didn't we, mate? So now just go to the description and you will find all the things. Toby's Twitter handle was in the top of the video. We'll be back next time with something else, but I don't know what, because I don't know what order we're recording these in. So, okay, thanks, bye. Support your 7th or 8th favourite YouTube channel by buying crap, tat, junk, hogwash and filth at redbubble.com/people/Val Verde Shop.